Hello, everyone, and welcome to College to Career, helping students find their way in the new economy. My name is Peggy McGillis, and I'm the Director of Industries Marketing with Workday, and I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items for you before we begin. If at any time during the webinar you have any problems with your connection, please email me at peggy.mcgillis@workday.com. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation, so please submit all of them through the Q&A box located in your console. As I said, all questions will be held until the end, but we will get to as many as possible. Today's webinar is being recorded. The webinar replay and slides will be made available shortly after the webcast. The replay will also be posted on www.workday.com. I'd like to take a minute to introduce our fantastic presenters today. That is Jeff Zelingo and Andy Chan. Jeff Zelingo is a best-selling author and award-winning columnist who helps parents and higher education leaders imagine the college and university of the future and how to succeed in a fast-changing economy. His newest book, There is Life After College, explores how today's young adults need to navigate school for the job market of tomorrow. A regular contributor to the Washington Post, Jeff is a special advisor and professor of practice at Arizona State University and a visiting scholar at Georgia Tech's Center for 21st Century Universities. He is the former top editor of the Chronicle of Higher Education, where he worked for 16 years in a variety of reporting and editing roles. Andy Chan is the Vice President for Innovation and Career Development at Wake Forest University. Andy oversees the Office of Personnel and Career Development for Students and Alumni, the Center for Innovation, Creativity, and Entrepreneurship, and the Mentoring Resources Center. Andy also coordinates university-wide innovation initiatives and projects, including Wake West programs and activities in the San Francisco Bay Area. Andy previously led the MBA Career Management Center at Stanford University and has coached and mentored students and professionals of all ages. Having held leadership roles in venture-backed startups, educational technology, consumer marketing, and management consulting, Andy's experiences have prepared him well to educate and equip today's college students who are expected to hold over 20 jobs in his or her lifetime. So, gentlemen, I will now turn it over to you.
Thanks, Peggy, and thanks for that introduction. And I'm looking forward to this webinar today and to talking a little bit with Andy Chan about his work at Wake Forest and the work that everyone is doing out there in terms of trying to ease this transition from education to the workforce. So in the last 2 years, I've been working on my new book, There is Life After College. And really what I wanted to know is how do today's young adults launch into their 20s? For many of them, we know the transition is far from easy or seamless. We know that nearly 50% are underemployed, according to the Federal Reserve, meaning they're in jobs that don't require a bachelor's degree. The age of financial independence for college graduates is now 30. According to the Georgetown Center on Education and the Workforce, in the early 1980s, it was 26. For the book, I wanted to understand the experiences that shaped people in these formative years, so I had a polling firm conduct a national survey of people in their 20s, and we found that young adults launch into their third decade of life in one of three ways, as shown on this slide here. They're either sprinters, they're wanderers, or they're stragglers. The sprinters jump right into their career after college, and they're on a path to a successful launch after completing additional education or jumping right into their career after college. Determination and experience are the markers of sprinters. And while we imagine this is how all graduates should launch today, only 35% of young adults are actually sprinters, according to my survey. Wanderers take their time, about half of their 20s, to get their start in a career. Students who drift through college are likely to become wanderers afterwards. And according to my survey, 32% of today's 20-somethings could be described as wanderers. The final group are stragglers. And stragglers press pause on their 20s, and they spend most of that decade trying to get their start in a career. And as you can see from this slide, stragglers make up about 33% of 20-somethings. So overall, we're seeing about 2/3 of 20-somethings are struggling in this launch after college and into their 20s. Now, whether somebody becomes a sprinter, a wanderer, or a straggler on the journey through their 20s really depends largely on 3 factors that come to define their years after high school. The big one is their internships, and how many internships they have in college, and what they do in those internships, as you can see from this slide on the importance of internships. Today, employers hire as full-time workers around 50% of the interns who have worked for them before they graduated. And at large companies and in some industries, the share of interns who get full-time job offers is actually closer to 75%. Internships are now a critical cog in the recruiting wheel for employers and how new college graduates increasingly enter the workforce for the first time. The poll found that 79% of sprinters had at least one internship in college, as you can see, compared to 47% of wanderers and just 24% of stragglers. What's even more important, as you can see under sprinters, is that nearly half of the sprinters are employed at a company where they interned, compared with only 13% of wanderers. And so the bottom line here, in my opinion, is that undergraduates can no longer wait until the second semester of their senior year. About how companies and organizations are moving up the recruiting calendar for college graduates. As Pat Rose, the director of Penn's Career Center, told me, there was a time when 50 employers came to recruit for interns, and now they have 180. And so this is the most critical factor in how students launch is how many internships they have. And as you can see, this really impacts how they do after graduation. And so it's critical the number of internships they have there. There are 2 other factors that are critical for how students launch after college in terms of how they go to college. The number 2 factor beyond internships is how much debt they have at graduation. The more loan debt that students amass in college, the less flexibility they have when they graduate. Loan payments come to dictate their lives. Salary, not fit, happiness, or career advancement become the driving decision in choosing a job. And as you can see from this slide, 43% of sprinters had less than $10,000 worth of debt at commencement, which is far short of the $37,000 in average debt the class of 2016 had. For many students, debt is inevitable, but too often students don't realize the impact that their decision to take on too much debt at the age of 18 will have when they start out their career 4 years later. And so what's happening, and what I found in reporting the book, they have to take a job just to pay the bills. thinking it will be a short-term gig. But that 6-month plan turns into a year and then 2 years. They become wanderers, and now in their mid-20s, they're competing for jobs with more recent college graduates who have fresh skills. So number one, straggler is internships. Number 2 factor is how much debt they have. The third factor, and probably the most critical, is that how somebody launches into their 20s is the credential itself, and the credential still matters. And I think you'll see that from looking, for example, at the percentage of stragglers who have some college credit but no degree by their mid-20s. This number was kind of surprising to me, but 99% of people, of the third of 20-somethings who can be considered stragglers, have some college credit but no degree by their mid-20s. And this might be surprising, but the fact of the matter is, according to the National Student Clearinghouse, 12 million 20-somethings have some college credits and no degree. And indeed, people in their 20s now make up by far the largest share of the 31 million adults in the U.S. who have left college short of a degree. And so it's really critical as we think about not only access and to college, but more importantly, it's critical to realize that these students really need to get that credential, or else they're more likely to become a straggler after graduation. So that, to me, sets the stage for the conversation that we're going to have today with Andy Chan, who we introduced earlier. Andy is really, as I describe him in the book, a rock star of the career services movement and kind of rethinking career services in American colleges and universities, and I'm thrilled that he's with us here today. So Andy, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate those kind words.
So Andy, beyond the media and political hype and the parental frustration right now with kind of this transition from college to the workforce, could you give me a sense of how bad the situation is? At this time of year, we just spent the last couple of weeks going through college graduations, and you see stories about those underemployed college graduates who got jobs at Starbucks after getting a bachelor's degree. Give me a sense of how bad the situation is. As I just outlined, 2/3 are struggling. That doesn't mean they necessarily don't have jobs. They're not unemployed, but in some cases they're underemployed. Give me a sense of how bad the situation is.
Sure. I wish I could say that it's a much better situation than it seems. But when thinking about the average college student, knowing that there are close to 4,000 universities and colleges across the country, I think a lot of times we can get focused on the students who are at maybe elite schools and how they're doing, of which in general, I think they're very fortunate. They're doing pretty well. But from the average college student standpoint, it's really not a good situation from their point of view. I think there's a couple factors. One is that employers' expectations regarding what students need to know in terms of their skills and knowledge and how prepared they are to be able to interview well and do well on the job, those expectations are very, very high. The employers have the ability today to think about hiring an experienced person, comparing them to a college student, and employers also don't have as much resources to do the training that they used to have in the old days. So they want students to be ready to work, and many employers complain that students are not ready to really go to work for them. So that's causing a challenge. The second is that they're very discerning and deliberate about their hiring. So students can get and experience a lot of rejection and get very discouraged. So as a young person, when you face that a lot in your life, especially when you grew up feeling like you were sort of getting everything that you wanted, or that the world is your oyster and it's just for you to go out there. When you start to face a lot of challenge, it can lead to a lot of discouragement, which leads to almost a type of sort of death cycle for a student where they get really discouraged and stop having energy for the process. And then where it actually works well is in programs which are very vocation oriented. So there are some colleges that have like nursing schools and engineering schools and education schools or programs where they're very focused on trying to help students move into the workplace. So those types of students probably end up being better off, very similar to your sprinter who has made that decision early. It doesn't mean that all students have to do that, but those are the cases where it's a little bit better. But in general, colleges are not doing a good enough job to educate and prepare students for the working world. So overall, given the challenging and competitive job marketplace, and then the high cost of college and the average debt burden that you talked about, students really are feeling a lot of pressure. And I think many are very frustrated and pretty angry about their situation. So I wish it were better, but it is where it is. I was wondering, Jeff, from your point of view, how much of this problem and maybe the solutions are in the hands of the employers? What could employers be doing to maybe make this a little bit better for college students?
Well, I think they need to be clearer in kind of what they want. I mean, I mentioned earlier, for example, that that we have underemployment here for college graduates, and I don't think that most parents are sending their children to get a 4-year degree, wanting them to work. And no offense against the great baristas at Starbucks, and I know that's a stereotype, but I don't think most parents are sending their kids to college so they can work at Starbucks, or another job is like executive assistant, where again maybe years ago it didn't even require a bachelor's degree. And really, what I think employers need to be, what I think employers need to do more of for students is to be more clear about the requirements for jobs, what they want, particularly out of the so-called soft skills, the ability to work in teams and the ability to problem solve. I think that most students now think that they need to go to college to get vocational skills. And there's been more of a focus on this by colleges in recent years. And we know the benefits, for example, of a place like Wake Forest, which is kind of in the classic liberal arts tradition, is to provide students with that broad education. And I think that employers need to signal to students and to their parents, to be honest, because parents drive these decisions, as you know. I think they need to be more clear in the fact that students need to have both broad knowledge as well as detailed knowledge in a particular field. So they need to have both the liberal arts and the practical arts. And I worry that students are not getting that message. And I think that employers, perhaps working with with higher education officials, could be more clear in delivering that message to students and to their parents. So, Andy, I wanted to ask you, why don't colleges do more to help make their students more employable, right? So we see that some colleges are very good at the practical skills. Some colleges are very good at providing students with the broad liberal arts. But why do colleges kind of push back against this idea of employability?
I think that on the one hand, I think that some colleges actually believe they're doing a pretty good job of it. And I think one of the reasons is something you and I have talked about before, which is many schools will report that they have very good employment outcomes where 85 or 90+% of their students are in jobs or graduate school within 6 months of graduation. But then when you ask them, so how many students did you actually get the data from, they either don't tell you or it's a very low number. So the reality is the data set is not big enough to really project what's really going on with all your students. So I do think that's one thing that happens where the schools have sort of tricked themselves and think they're doing a good job, but they're really not. I think a second thing is that many colleges, and colleges can get very siloed, they may actually come to believe that the work to help students be employable for life after college is solely the responsibility of just the career office, when in fact the entire college community can be part of this process to help address this challenge. I think one of the biggest things that happens in colleges is students really listen to faculty members. And so faculty members are doing things in their classroom, outside their classroom, helping students get connected to alumni, exposing how their classwork is connected to the world of work outside, how people, given what they majored in, were able to get jobs in areas that are different from what they majored in. the better off the students are in understanding how the whole process works. But if they don't ever have those conversations, students don't really understand. And I know we could say, well, they should all go to the career office, but students focus first on their academics, and they focus on other extracurricular, oftentimes fun things to do. And so it's hard to make it happen unless colleges make it really part of the culture and make it an essential part of the curriculum. And I think that's the last final piece, is that, usually the faculty they've come from careers where they actually haven't been out in the workplace a lot of times. And so as a result, they don't really totally understand the process and the stress that students are undergoing. And so if we could actually have faculty say, wow, we should actually look at our curriculum and the requirements we have and the structure of the program to help students have more job search, career competency development that helps them be more prepared for life after college, I think that actually you would see a lot more performance and success for the students. But right now, I think most describe job search and career development as extracurricular, which to students that sounds like it's not essential. So that word, it just definitely sounds like this is just extra, and so we'll just do it when we have to, which, like you said in the beginning, tends to be your last semester of college, and then by that time it's too late if you really want to leverage the experience that you had in college to find a great job when you get out of school. So Jeff, in doing the research for your book, I was wondering, did the employers care about majors? Like a lot of people think, what you majored in is going to determine where you go, after you graduate, and that you could really make some bad decisions. What did you find out in doing your research for your book?
Andy, it's a great question, and it's a question, to be honest with you, I get all the time from parents and students. What should my major be? Should I major in something practical, or should I pursue my passions? And one of the things that I found in talking to many employers is that majors don't matter. Again, it's those experiences that matter the most. So if we go back to, for example, those folks who are sprinters coming out of college, now you'll see that 30% of them studied a STEM major, science, technology, engineering, or math. But 70% obviously didn't. And STEM majors, tend to produce very specific outcomes, and students who are very focused on particular jobs. And what I found in my research, particularly looking, for example, at two reports that Burning Glass Technologies did out of Boston. And Burning Glass, for those on the webinar who may not be familiar with them, they do workplace analytics. They scan millions of job ads across the country, online job ads, and they're really looking for, what are the baseline skills that employers are looking for. And they found that in 4 out of 5 job ads, about 25 skills kept coming up over and over and over again. And what was interesting is that the top 5 skills, almost no matter the job, no matter the occupation, no matter the industry, are pretty similar. And most of those skills are things like communication and writing and problem solving and working in teams and customer service. So they're the more of what we tend to call the soft skills that in most cases are not taught in any specific major. And so as a result, this, again, some majors do lead specifically to jobs, but I think we all can point to people out there, and including many of the employers I talked with, the comment from a lot of the recruiters and a lot of the CEOs I talked with was, I am now working in a field I never thought I would be working in. And, and it has nothing to do with my collegiate major. And in fact, I heard over and over again from students I talked with that, they would pick a major either their freshman or sophomore year, and by the time they got to their senior year and started applying for jobs, it was like a foreign language to them. All these jobs existed that they didn't even know existed when they picked their with their major. And so I guess, Andy, that brings up a good question about success for colleges and universities, because a lot of colleges and universities will say, we get students jobs in their major, right? And they not only talk about the percentage of students who are employed after graduation, but they talk a lot about those who are employed in their major. And so how much does it matter if a college student finds a job that is aligned with their field of study?
I actually think that it's less about, who does it matter to the college, or who does it matter to the people in general, but really to the student themselves. And I think that one of the things that we do, we actually have a whole set of career courses at Wake Forest, which are called our College to Career courses. We have information about them on our website that shows like what the students learn in these different courses. They're half semester, 1.5 credit classes, and through those, one of the things that we talk about, we have this mantra, you're not married to your major, meaning that you can decide to work in the area that your major is, but if you decide not to, or you're looking for things that are outside of it, here are all the other types of things that you can do to build up your skill set and your capabilities and basically your stories when you're meeting people and interviewing and networking, so that they can see that you know a lot more than what you're learning in your major. So I think that that's an important thing, is that having students understand this reality is a concept that a lot of students don't really know about. And so that's why they can get very discouraged when they're picking a major, because most of the outside world is going to tell them, if you majored in, name it, English, philosophy, classics, they're going to tell you, what are you going to do with that? And what happens is students hear that enough, they get really discouraged. So you actually have to find the other information that helps students understand how you can move into great jobs, or jobs that you desire, based on the fact that no matter what you majored in. Now, it is important to recognize, though, that there are some fields where having a degree in those fields is really required. And so whether it's accounting or computer science or certain fields of engineering, you actually really do need to have that as your background, but not in all. And that's the other thing, is that there's a lot of different sort of shades of this these days. A lot of people will say, in order to be a doctor, you have to be a biology major, but there's a lot of schools today that are interested in students who are taking the biology classes, but they can major in something else totally different. And so that's the kind of thing that it's worth a student taking the time to talk to their advisors at school, taking the time to get to know the career people at their school, and do the research on those careers. I mean, that's a whole other thing. Like, almost every single career office website has some section on explore careers. And if you go into that, you can actually see all the background that people have in order to be able to progress into those career sectors that will help them make more informed decisions. So, like I said, I think it matters in some fields, but not in others. But the key is getting the student to get excited about exploring and learning to get started. And usually the best way to do it is finding a way to include that in a curricular type / mandatory experience that a student has to have, so they're doing it. Otherwise, it's extracurricular, and otherwise then they're probably leaving it till later.
So, Andy, I want to talk a little bit about potential solutions, right? So we talk about, 2/3 of college students are struggling to, or college graduates are struggling to launch in their careers. I mean, is this enough of a worry of college leaders? Are they doing enough about career services and career outcomes for students? We know from recent surveys they're certainly talking a lot more about it on campuses, and I'm sure many of the people on the webinar today are in positions where they're either in the career offices or they're responsible for their career offices. But is this not enough of a priority for enough colleges in your mind?
I think in general it is increasing. I feel like my experience at Wake Forest, starting in 2012 when we did our Rethinking Success conference, which again, all the information on that conference and a white paper on transforming the college career experiences on our website, a lot of people have started to access resources. Workday at Stanford and Christine Cruz-Vergara, who's at Wellesley now, like they wrote a great paper to get people thinking about it more strategically. So it's really is increasing, and a lot of schools are putting both new resources and new leaders in place. But in general, across, again, the 4,000 schools in the country, not enough attention and resources is actually happening. I actually interview a lot of career services leaders in my work, and every time I have a session with them, about 2/3 of them will say that they don't perceive that their president either understands or is willing to commit the time and resources to understanding this college to career problem and trying to figure out how to make it better and make it more of a systemic solution across the university, where the career services office is part of the solution, as opposed to, and driving a lot of it, as opposed to, it's just this problem that the career services team is supposed to figure out, and they don't get any more new resources, and good luck, hope you can figure it out. It definitely has to be something where the faculty has to be part of the solution. And so, I do think that that's something that there's still a lot more work to be done. And I think we're at the beginning of something, and this kind of conversation is hopefully helping a lot of people feel inspired to want to make change happen, especially at the highest levels of the university.
So, Andy, do you think that technology is going to improve this situation? I mean, we see technological solutions in other parts of the universities and colleges and universities. But do you think that technology is part of the answer here? I know you've been a big proponent of kind of personalizing the career services experience a lot more with technology. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, and maybe you could talk about whether that's one of the solutions here.
Yeah, I definitely think that will be one big part of the solution as we go forward. Students are expecting technology to work on their behalf. I think that through technology like Handshake, like 1220, you'll see solutions, and I think I can imagine Workday is going to develop something in this area too, where you'll have greater student engagement because you can tailor information and connections to people that they haven't had before just by knowing what students are interested in. I think that's going to be a huge area of opportunity. I think the second thing is that students are going to be able to access a lot more opportunities because they'll look beyond just their school's network, but probably across more of a global network, given the way that the whole world is becoming more connected. And I think for schools in general, we should have better data so we can report outcomes, understand what students are doing, find the students who really need help and how to support those, and how to help those who are successful to be able to be, sort of models for those students who need help. So I do think that because higher education really has to become more accountable for delivering results, technology and data is going to be a big part of that solution. So I can definitely see that happening as we go forward. So Jeff, I was wondering, we've talked a little bit about ways that things are going to get better. I think one of the things that we all talk about are starting the process early, getting it in the curriculum, more internships and co-ops, helping students navigate their debt, engaging the network of alumni and parents, and also getting, obviously, college leaders to be a part of this whole, solution. Given that, are there some schools or types of programs that you think are doing a pretty good job? You obviously talked to a bunch of them while you were doing your research. I'd be curious what you found.
Well, Andy, I think really I think the institutions that are doing the best are those that are like yours that have kind of rethought career services for the 21st century. So it's not just kind of career services planning and placement like it used to be back in my day when I went to college, a couple of decades ago. But it's really kind of it's about the development of the whole student, and it starts on day one of the of college, and where I think the institutions that are surprisingly doing the best on this, and may be surprising because I think most of them see them as kind of being classic, liberal arts colleges, are those liberal arts colleges that are maybe not in the top tier, but that feel a lot of pressure to defend their mission to students, parents, and employers, and I'm really interested in what they're doing. Places like St. Olaf and Franklin and Marshall in Pennsylvania. I think Dan Porterfield, the president of Franklin and Marshall, who when he came in, really made the position around career services much bigger, very much like your president has done there at Wake Forest, elevated it to a much higher level. But also he sees career development as something that is not just that happens in the 4 years of college, but really starts before college, and more critically is those first couple of years after college. Because as you can see, particularly from the wanderers that I talked about earlier, I mean, they worry me the most. We always have had stragglers, people who really took most of their 20s to get it going, and as you can. And as you know from the work even on this survey that I took, many of these stragglers are college dropouts, right? So there's other issues going on there with academics and finances that colleges need to focus on. But the wanderers they're college graduates, right? And 66% of them don't find work immediately after college. They tend to wander through college. They tend to switch their majors often. They need support after college. And what's happening is they come out of college, they might have, from the college's point of view, they might check the box that says, yes, I'm employed, but they're part of these underemployed students that I talked about earlier. But they tend to be, a lot of them tend to be in their mid-20s. And as I talk to them, as I did qualitative research for this book and talked to them, they're kind of lost. and they really do need help. And who better to help them than their alma maters? And so I really think that if colleges can figure out what type of career services can we provide to students post-college, particularly for these students who are not sure what they want to do right after graduation, I think that would be pretty critical at this point. Andy, I want to start to wrap up before we get to questions here. We have about 5 or 10 minutes or so before we open it up to the audience for questions. So please keep asking the questions. We have a bunch coming in, and would love to get a few more. So if you have a question, feel free to ask it. But I wanted to talk again, going back to liberal arts colleges. So I think, for example, that I talked about how liberal arts colleges are kind of ahead of the game on this front. How can they better make their value proposition to students and parents? Many students and parents that I talk to say it's a mistake to go to a liberal arts college or major in something that doesn't seem to lead directly to employment opportunities. I had a professor, for example, at George Mason University in Northern Virginia tell me recently that he assigned his students this great history book, and they loved it, right? They had this great discussion about it, and he asked them, how many of you are majoring in history? And like one hand in the class went up, and like 90% of them were business majors. And he said, well, why are you all majoring in business when, half of them said, well, I'd rather major in X, Y, or Z. And it basically came down to their parents told them they had to major in something that leads to a job. We know that there's a lot of pressure on that these days. What can colleges and universities do?
This is an interesting question because I hear it a lot too, and what I like to have people think about is being careful not to look for a general answer to a very specific and personal question. So if you're a parent and you have a child, your question is not should I go to any liberal arts college, it's actually given who my child is and how they're wired and what they're looking to do, what are the right set of colleges that are appropriate for my child, whether it be a liberal arts or not, because what we're doing in that kind of answer is coming up with a generalization about all colleges that you can't generalize because every college is so uniquely different and the market is incredibly fragmented in terms of how they do things. So, like when I hear that, people sometimes say to us, like, why go to Wake Forest? It's a liberal arts school. I will answer, well, let's talk about what liberal arts at Wake Forest is. I can't answer for all the rest of the colleges in the world because they're doing something different, but let me tell you what we do and how we help students navigate from college to career. And I wouldn't doubt that many of the colleges out there would answer the same exact way. If they can stay away from them, let me defend all the liberal arts college as a sort of general concept. So I think that's one thing is, if you're going to ask a personal question, let's look for the personal answer. And I think that's both about the college, but then also about the student. And that's what I think about. That's an important thing about a student is back to your analysis, which I think is very nice to actually say, there's 3 kinds of students. You might sort of try to ask yourself, what is the wiring of your particular child as they're headed into college? Are they more likely to be the sprinter, the wanderer, the straggler? And given that, what's the right environment for them that helps them become more of a purposeful wanderer or become a sprinter over their 4 years, as opposed to, because my child is this way when I first come in, there's no hope for them. Like, that's the worst thing if you actually label your child as some way, when this period between the ages of 18 to 25 is so developmental in so many ways that I've seen so many students actually in a very short period of time become totally confident and capable and totally different than they were when they came in because they were in the right environment, because the student developed motivation, they had mentors, they got excited about something that they didn't even know about before they came. So you have to sort of think about those things. Now, the thing I would ask them to be thinking about the school is understanding, does the school really think about that college career experience? Do they help the students navigate that? Does the students support the students' maybe lack of clarity and help them to get clarity? I think that's important. So I think those are all good questions that people need to ask as they go to look at schools to be able to make the right kind of situation, the right kind of decision. But I think the one thing you made in the very outset, which is whatever you decide, think about the financial impact on your family and the student, especially as it relates to debt. Because no matter how good a school is, if you take on too much debt, there's enough data out there that proves that debt can result in disaster. And so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. So maybe one last thing that I'm thinking about too, Jeff, that I wanted to ask you is when you think about parents and high school educators, is there anything they can do, or you got some sense that they could do to help students to become more sprinters or purposeful wanderers as opposed to stragglers? Like, what are the kinds of things that, if you have a high schooler or you have a young college student, that you might do to help them navigate more clearly and not end up straggling too long?
Well, and I think this is important. I think this is an important point to bring up with the college officials on the webinar today as well, and that's the fact that this is a journey that begins in high school, even some ways sooner. But we can't just think about launching into a career the second semester of senior year of college. The decisions that somebody makes before they go to college, and I think you mentioned the critical one, and that's debt, really have a long tail on them, and they really impact a student after graduation. And so if your son or daughter or a student or prospective student is not quite sure why they're going to college, I think the worst thing to do is to encourage them to go right off, 3 months after high school graduation. I talk a lot in the book about different on-ramps to college. It's not that I'm definitely not part of the don't go to college crowd. I definitely think that everybody needs some sort of post-secondary education. But I talk in the book a lot about the idea of the gap year, and which has become much more popular just in the last couple of weeks since Malia Obama decided she's going to take a gap year. But I think gap years tend to have a reputation as something that wealthy kids do, and they go backpack through Europe. But as I outline in the book, there are many more options now for time between high school and college, using it as a transitional point in life, where students can get academic help, because we know 60% of students now come needing some remedial education in college. So they could do some of that work outside the walls of college, where they could get some mentorship and try to figure out what careers they want. Because again, I think many people come into college having no idea what they want to do, and they spin their wheels a while. Exploration in college is good, but it's much more expensive to do that exploration now. And so are there ways where you can explore outside of college? And then finally, where they could get some work experience, because we have many teenagers now. We're at our lowest level of teenage employment in decades. And so many students come to college not really having worked a job, and perhaps doing that in that transitional period between high school and college could be great. And for colleges and universities, I think we should start to rethink that transitional period. Are there things that colleges can do before a student's first year or during a student's first year that helps them with this exploration period, helps them explore careers? Because the fact of the matter is that most students pick careers that are familiar to them, right? Careers that their parents have or their friends' parents have. And as the country becomes more segregated by careers as well, there's some jobs that nobody ever gets insight into. And then again, they end up in their senior year and they start applying for these jobs and they had no idea they existed. So are there things that colleges can do where they create these bridge year programs for students at the front end, and by the way, then also provide them a bridge at the other end of college and help them find that on-ramp to a career? And that could include, what I call the new learning economy, right? There's this new learning economy that's growing up outside of traditional higher ed. It's things like the MOOC providers, Coursera and edX. It's things like lynda.com and General Assembly, the boot camps, and Galvanize, the boot camps that we have out there. But there's all of these places now where you can get skills training in a short spurt, a couple weeks, even a couple of hours in some cases. That is what many people refer to as the last mile, right? Training. It gets you from your degree to a job. And most colleges don't do this. And so we've had this new learning economy grow up outside of higher education. I met many of these students who do this in the summer or the fall or the months or after they graduate from college. And so just like at the front end of college, is there something we can do about the back end? Can we redesign the freshman year and redesign the senior year of college so that they ease students into college at the front end and ease students into the workforce at the back end? And I think that, to me, is the challenge now facing both the academic side of the house in colleges and universities, but also people on your end who are thinking about career development and whole person development, so that we're creating students who not necessarily launch fast from college, but that they launch with some sort of purpose. Andy, before we go into questions, I wanted to ask you one last question, and then I want to take some of the questions that we have lining up from the audience here. Parents are obviously focused on the ROI and the value of college. How do you measure that at Wake Forest? What do you tell parents, for example, in weighing the decision between a place like Wake Forest and a lower-priced public college, of course, which you have a lot in North Carolina, having a great UNC system there? How do you help them weigh that decision?
When I think about the idea of return on your investment, one of the biggest challenges about that is people are looking for just a financial number to tell you exactly like the way it works, and that's very difficult because at the end of the day, your student has full sort of free will to decide what they want to do with their time, and if they decide to do something that wasn't what you planned on, like the fact that close to 90% of the students who think they want to go to college for medical school actually decide not going to medical school, like that's could probably be a disappointment for parents. So, they do something else and they probably go on and think about what their lives are about. So we do talk about the fact that we are trying to help students find meaningful jobs and careers. They want to find purpose and sort of passion that are values to them as opposed to what the world wants from them. And so it is a lot about self-discovery, but at the same time, you have to have outcomes. And so having positive employment outcomes pretty consistently for us, over 95, close to 100%, each year within 6 months of graduation is a really key signal. I think the second thing is that when you see the amount of resources and attention we place to this from the president all the way down, and even, like I said, even into some of the faculty departments where they care a lot and they spend a lot of time mentoring students, when students tell prospective applicants what it's all about, that gets people excited. So, students can get a feel for what a campus cares about and what they value, and so we're able to actually be very authentic about that. I do think that the one thing that I know you've asked me in the past, which is, so if you had the choice between going to Wake Forest or a lower-priced public college, but you really had some challenges at affording it, one of the issues is, we're doing our best to provide scholarships and financial aid to as many students as we can, but sometimes that's not enough given the family's financial situation. And in every case, I will always lean towards, the family should not take on substantial debt to put themselves in a world of pain or to put their student into that place, because it not only impacts your relationship with your child, but your child feels this huge sense of burden as to what are the kinds of work that I need to go do to make up for this debt, and what if I can't get it, and they're just sort of hanging with it for many, many years. And I think that that's one of the things that it's, think about building a foundation for life. You want to start that foundation as strong as you can, and I think one of those pieces of strength has to be your financial foundation. So I would recommend not to do it, even though it means that, we don't get the person who gets to come to Wake, but there are great schools out there of all different types. And there are actually many schools who you maybe have never heard of that have financial aid or scholarship money for your student that they can't get at another place. Like that could be the ticket to their opening up many doors, having a lot of confidence, going on to a great employment place or graduate school. So I do think it's a lot about starting your child in the right place with the right foundation in a holistic kind of way, including financial. So it's not as simple as just go to a great brand name school that everyone recognizes. I think that's a dangerous decision criteria that you might use to decide, is that the best place for my child?
That's great. Andy, I want to move into Q&A and appreciate the folks who have sent in questions already. Please keep them coming in, and we'll try to get to all of them. Somebody had asked about the wanderer definition, and really I want to look at maybe all three of them. So while we're going through Q&A, I'm going to push back to some of those slides so you can kind of see a little bit more about the audience, about those three, the definitions of each of the sprinters, the wanderers, and the stragglers, and I'll push through some of those slides. But Andy, we got a question here from somebody about how can students obtain ideas for different career paths, right? If you can't just take a course saying, what should I do with my life? Excuse me. Where might students access this information? How can students access information on career paths in your mind?
That's a really good question. So there's a couple different places that are tools that your Career Center has or you could find online. So I'll just name a few of them. So the ONET, O-N-E-T, is offered by the Department of Labor, and they actually have done a huge analysis, and there's an interest inventory that you can do that by going through it in like 10 minutes, it'll tell you right away, given the way that you're wired, here's a bunch of types of jobs and careers that would be of interest to you. Some of them are not going to be of any interest at all, but at least gives you a start of what you might want to look at. That's sort of one thing. Second thing is that I really like Road Trip Nation. Road Trip Nation is a set of videos that have been produced, very well done, very creative, very entertaining to young people around how do I find, like, what is it like to really do day on the job in different fields? And so that's another one. Vault.com is another great resource that has all this information about all these different careers that then go into how do you find internships, how do you find jobs. It's very similar to what you might find on a really great career site. You could go to the Wake Forest career site and look up Explore Careers, and before you know it, you've got like all these careers that have all these links and information that you could go to. So I think a lot of career centers have that type of information too. It's actually less about the information than it is about the next step, which is what people want to do eventually is to talk to someone. And so this is one where, you know, LinkedIn has really locked up the market of the network of people out there who are employed. And you can find it by your school, you can find it by your high school, you can find it by a lot of different factors, your hometown or where you want to live. And by doing so, you can type in a career field, you can type in a company, and before you know it, all of a sudden you're finding people who you might be interested in talking to. And there are many videos on LinkedIn that give you instructions on how to go about writing the right introductory email, how do you go about putting together a really good profile. But these are all things that college students, obviously in a place like Wake, we teach them all how to do it. We have classes, we do a lot of workshops to help people, and all schools actually do different things like that. So if I were a student, I'd be thinking, I have to do this stuff. This is part of the deal of going to college. I have to actually be thinking about how I'm going to build a life and a career. This stuff I'm paying for as part of my tuition, so take advantage of it. I think that's actually the biggest thing is most students will say, I won't use the career office till I figure out what I want to do. But actually, that's what the career office is there for, is they have all these resources to help you figure out what you want to do, and even connections to people and events to help you learn that. So don't be afraid to go, and it's totally okay to ask dumb questions because everyone was 18 at one time. Everyone knows how hard it is, and they all want to help you. That's actually the number one thing is that so many alums out there want to be helping current students, but many current students think none of the alums are available, but it's actually totally the opposite. All the alums really want to help students. So that's what I would say is begin that process and figure out what's in the circle and what's actually out and just sort of keep honing that down over time.
And we also got a question about internships and the role of professional associations, right, which have, you know, obviously a big concern about the future of their professions, right? So, companies obviously have their own interests at heart, but the associations want to make sure that, there's going to be lawyers forever and accountants forever and so forth. What is the role, in your opinion, of professional associations in setting not only standards for internships, but in helping disseminate information and even help place students in internships?
Good question. So think of associations as a place where college students can go and learn what does it mean to be a professional in that field. So as opposed to jumping too quickly to the can I get a job through that, think about it, can I learn about what it really means to be a great lawyer or a great accountant or whatever, a civil engineer, whatever it might be, because that's actually the thing that most students need to do is learn. They actually need to learn what does it really mean to do this, and also how is this whole field changing so that over the next 5 to 10 years, if I were in it, what do I need to know to be able to be successful and be able to get a job in this area? And that's the kind of thing where, students are great at doing research and learning. That's what they should take it for. That does one thing. The second thing is that it helps them set their brand for saying, actually, I'm really interested in this area. So that's helpful to them as they go and talk to people. And then if they go to any of the events and start meeting people, again, if I think about like all college students going to join an association and then going to an event and meeting people, we've got to be talking about less than 1% of all the college students in the country. And so as a result, you really stand out because you actually took the effort to go meet them. And so from there, what happens is those relationships turn into, hey, maybe we have some work this summer. Would you like to come work for us? So rather than think about the association doing the work to create jobs for the students, think about the students actually just participating in the association that then leads to an opportunity. And opportunities really happen through people meeting people. I know that everyone's posting opportunities and being selective about the process, but what we know is that most jobs are secured through networking, and it's usually by getting to know people and getting people to know who you are and liking you. And so it's through that process good things happen. So I think associations have great value. And I think in terms of generating internships, though, I don't know if I would go that far as say that's their responsibility. But if any associations are willing to do that, it'd be great to, help students know that. But I think a lot of times the career offices can help you navigate those types of questions.
We have time probably for just two more questions. One of them came in about the survey research, which was a good question about demographics, which comes up often, specifically socioeconomic background. We did not ask about their family income when they went to college, but we did ask them about whether their parents went to college and graduated from college, which is somewhat of a proxy for socioeconomic background. And we learned, and not surprisingly, that first generation, second generation, and third generation students are more likely to be sprinters. And I don't think that really surprises anyone after looking at this. And that to me places even more of an onus on colleges as they recruit more first generation students to make sure that they don't become wanderers and really don't become stragglers. And maybe this is a question for you, Andy. I know that there's been a big focus at your university and many others among selective universities to recruit more low-income and first-generation students. Do you do anything different for those students who may not come from a background where they have a huge network, not only to help them get jobs, but also both of us were in New York yesterday, and we had this discussion about how expensive it is to live in New York after college, and and if your parents are not subsidizing you, you might not be able to live there. What do you do to help those first generation students that you're increasingly hoping to enroll around career services?
Great question. So our first generation students and many of our underrepresented minority students, like many of them, they have different groups and clubs that are assembled. And we have coaches who are a liaison to those clubs and to the advisors to those clubs. So we're very close. And we will hold specialized sessions around job search that help them feel like among, like-minded people, what are the struggles that we're dealing with and how do we navigate through it? And so they appreciate actually the sort of customized nature of doing something like that. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we're very fortunate. We work very hard in our office as well as our fundraising office to go out and ask for support for students who are less resourced. So whether it be for tuition or whether it be for other special needs, and in particular, we actually have a whole fund that was set up by a very generous donor from the Kirby Family Foundation, where what they did was create an endowment. So we actually have money each year where students want to go on career treks, if they need clothing to be professional, if they need special support that other students can get because they have the resources but they can't, we'll provide that for them. And so we have really heartwarming examples of students who never imagined they could ever work, outside of the hometown and the country that they were in, and then ended up being able to get go on a career trek where they met a CEO at an interesting company. The CEO really took to them, brought them on, got them to work in an internship in London for the summer. And before you knew it, all of a sudden, they have this global career. And they went from a feeling like, I don't know if I'm going to do very much with my life other than get a good education, to I'm actually now working in a big city and really enjoying it and sort of see opportunities that I've never seen before. Now, again, obviously we had to go out and raise the money, and schools have to make decisions as to what they're raising money for. But I do think a lot of schools could look at that as an option to try to help those students who are less resourced than others. And I think one thing that was brought up when we were together actually yesterday is that there are actually a lot of other third-party foundations who have scholarships and fellowships for students who are first-generation students that they can get access to. So helping students sort of navigate that and knowing that there are actually people out there who really want to be helpful and be supportive. That's another source of resources and support that can help. But it is something that you have to just be committed to, and you have to continue to say, if we're going to actually bring these students to campus, we got to make that as a great experience for them and recognize that they have challenges that are very unique to them. So it does really help to get to know them. Education at the end of the day, I think, is at least on our campus, a person-to-person business. It's very personal. We care about every single person, and we want to show that in what we do. And I know it can be challenging for many schools that are much, much bigger, with thousands of students, or doing students online in terms of helping them and educating them. But I know that everyone in the academic world really wants to help these students to be successful.
That's again, given the demographic changes happening in higher education, I think it's an important thing to consider. Well, I thank you for joining us today, and it's been a great conversation, and I hope it's been very helpful for the audience. And thanks to Workday for putting this together and bringing this great audience together. And I enjoyed the conversation. So thanks for joining me, Andy.
Thanks, Jeff. Make sure everyone should read your book. It's a really great one and helpful for everyone to have a bigger picture view about college. And thank you to Workday, too. I appreciate being on.
I appreciate it, and everybody have a good day. Thank you.